I haven't talked about Underverse nearly enough on this channel. Underverse, written and animated by Gel Peñalosa, is genuinely amazing. And I'm including the prequel series XTale in this too, since they're really one big story. I have so much I can say about this whole series, so what better way to do that than with a mini review of every single episode of both Underverse and XTale in the form of a ranking. As always with these rankings, something has to be on the bottom, but none of my criticisms should be seen as any sort of slight on the creator or the series as a whole. Also, full spoilers ahead, you have been warned. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get on with
Hey, I want to be in the video.
Wait, dude, you haven't been on the channel in like 5 years. You think you can just randomly show up in a video for no reason?
Nope.
But you're going to anyway?
Yep.
Come on, no one's even gonna know who you are.
I'm Corn Popo.
That's all you got?
Crab, put the spelling up on the screen.
I mean, it's not really that hard to spell, it's just the way it sounds. Anyway, you don't even know what we're talking about. You haven't even watched Underverse.
Yes, I have.
Wait, really?
Yeah, B.U.D.Y told me to watch your Everything You Need to Know Before Watching Underverse video, and then use the watch guide in that video's description. So I did.
I mean, if you're just gonna give me free promotion like that, then I guess you can be on for this video.
Yay!
But if people don't like you, then you're out. Got it?
Okay, I promise I will be fun and awesome.
Yeah, okay. We'll need to find a camera for you. You know you haven't been on camera this whole conversation, right?
Oh, don't worry, I came prepared.
Hello! Let's just on with the video. Just quick before we start, I am actually going to start splitting these rankings into tiers just because, I don't know, it sounds fun. There isn't a single F tier episode in Underverse, so we'll start with the D tiers.
On a scale of 1 to 10, it's not good.
Okay, so I'm really only including this one because I know that if I don't, at least one person would be like, hey, did you know there's another short that you didn't talk about called Come Back? Yes, I know it's a thing, but it's just not really much. Just a bunch of Wingdings messages and glimpses of the early days of XTale before Timeline 1, foreshadowing how Xcaster is a deeper character than he may at first seem, plus a quick glimpse of Ink hinting that he has something to do with Xcaster. Which is neat, but that's all this is. Again, I'm only even bringing it up for the sake of completion.
Truce! Too slow.
Hey, does anyone else remember the Truce comic? It was really good. It's not canon anymore though, but the truce between Ink and Error still is, as is the main catalyst for this truce, but their individual motivations for it have changed. So now they're, I don't know? The comic's replacement, Season 1 Prologue Truce, mostly does what it needs to for the story, but leaves me a little confused as to why Ink and Error even formed their truce. Or rather, I mostly get why they formed it, but then they challenge each other to try and break that truce in the most significant way? So then why does Error seem so adamant that they keep the truce throughout most of Season 1? To be clear, I'm definitely not saying that Jackie should have kept the old comic as canon. That is her choice to make. And I'm probably just missing something here, but hey, something had to go way down here. And those were the only D tiers.
Aw, poor D tier. It probably feels so left out.
Are you patting the D tier?
Yep, invisibly.
But I can see you doing it.
Yeah, but you can't see it, so it's invisibly.
Makes sense to me. Anyway, the C tiers will be mostly super short episodes that I don't have a ton of stuff to say about, and honestly, a lot of them could be switched around based on how I feel on any particular day.
Nothing happens.
So XTale 3. It does its job with explaining the difference between reset and overwrite and advancing the main characters the tiniest bit, but that's about it. Yep, that's literally all I have to say about it. There's really not a lot here to talk about.
Everything's fine. Everything was not fine.
Remember the timeline when Frisk and Kara just got to live happy lives? Now that I think about it, I do kind of wish XTale 1 showed us a little more of what general life was like in the first timeline for that reason, but the glimpses into their relationship with Azrael is nice. And then everything goes wrong. Thanks, Xcaster.
Give him back.
The relationship between Frisk and Kara is the center of the XTale series, so seeing Kara have to murder Frisk in XTale 7 is pretty painful. Though funny enough, this is another one that I wish we had seen a little more of, because we don't really see the full extent of the pain they went through here. But the main purpose of this episode is to show how Kara became a ghost and explain what the X event really is, which it does well.
Because I'm you. No, I'm me. I'm me, he says.
And the worst true episode of Underverse is the first one. Hey, that's a pretty good sign. You can tell looking back on 0.0 that not a whole lot of the story had been fully thought out yet, something that's not even true of even the very next episode, which in my opinion is the true introduction to this story and these characters. We'll get to that later. 0.0 more or less just shows the inciting incident for Underverse's main story and a fine fight scene, but that's really it. So the post-credits scene of Season 1 was released as a separate video, so I'm ranking it here. It's probably the shortest thing on this list, but when I think of this video, I just think of the day I was at work and it came out right at the beginning of my lunch break out of nowhere and just how hype I got, even though I had no idea what it meant. But that's why it's as high as it is.
That is not ready yet.
Did I mention I'm including the comics here too? Because I am including the 2 comics. Mostly just so I have another excuse to talk about the first Timeline 10 comic, but I felt like if I'm going to include one, I should include both. 21 Years is still ongoing, and so far isn't that important to the main story, but it's got some really fun interactions, and expands the world of XTale Timeline 10 in some cool ways, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
I have the goosebumps on my skin elbows right now.
The shortest of the XTale timelines, XTale 6 is just the moment when Xcaster and Kara swap half a soul, which is a very important moment in the story, and it's very well animated and scored and everything, as is most stuff in this series. Though I may be stupid, but I'm still not exactly sure in terms of like the actual logistics of the world why this counts as its own timeline and not just part of Timeline 5, because I don't remember any actual overwrite taking place in between them, but oh well, it's not that big of a deal. I'm having a hard time thinking of things to say about XTale 0 for some reason. I think it's this high mostly because I really like Ink's monologue at the beginning. Yeah, it's actually a pretty creative way to show off his true motivations, having him talk to the audience for a few minutes, since they, the quote-unquote creators, do canonically exist in this story. And the thing with Ink showing Xcaster the multiverse is cool too, I just don't have a lot to say about it. It does what it needs to. And that's pretty much all the really short stuff, which means we're done with the C tier and on to the B tier.
Bees!
B tier.
Bees.
Bees?
Tier of bees.
I don't think there are any bees on this tier.
I know, but it's just fun to say bees.
Yes, it is. Anyway, this next stuff is good, but still just not the most substantial compared to the higher tiers.
I am a robot. I can be offended.
Don't you just love XTale episodes that start off wholesome only for Xcaster to ruin it in the end? Cause we've got 2 of them in a row right here. XTale 8 is the final turning point for Kara's character in the XTale series, where he finally fully gives up on trying to please Xcaster and firmly cements himself as being against him. About time. Though it also turns him into a murderer, which is not great. But what is great is the way that it's portrayed. Very dramatic. Good job.
You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Timeline 1 may have been where the first overwrite happened, but XTale 2 is where things really got dark and traumatic. This has some of what XTale 1 was missing, showing the characters having fun and living. Still not a lot of it, but what we got is good. I like how it shows a friendship between Frisk and Sans that resurfaces in Timeline 10 and is actually directly shown in the original XTale comic, which is super cool. I also love how the difference between Frisk and Kara's reaction to what X-Gaster is doing is really shown in full force this early, when it could have been really easy to make them feel really similar in these early stages. Great stuff.
Do you ever get the feeling that we exist simultaneously in multiple parallel universes, completely unaware of the other's very existence?
Is this our first full-length episode of Underverse proper? Yeah, wow, almost halfway through the list, nice. Once again reflective of the series' relatively slow start, 0.1 is the true introduction to the plot. It's the only main episode without a fight scene, which is fine because there's a lot of setup here to get through. There's a lot of different plot lines that this episode needed to start, and I think it does so pretty well. Especially with how we didn't get full context for what was going on in the main universe for years, but more on that later. So, it's got good setup, but still just setup nonetheless.
Papyrus is Papyrus.
Who doesn't love getting to watch Papyrus being a good boy? Well, I hope you enjoy it in XTale 9 because it doesn't last long, thanks X-Gaster. But it's still really nice while it's there, and the moment where it gets ruined is fittingly traumatic. So that's really more of the same from XTale, but what sets this one apart is that X-Gaster no longer has his soul, so his demeanor is completely different. X-Gaster is the most fascinating character in this series to me, and it's episodes like this that are a big part of the reason why. Both of Season 1's extra scenes are pretty short, but still manage to pack in a lot of important stuff. Extra Scene 1 is definitely the less exciting of the two, but it gets a boost on the list because of how it gives you the first hints of Ink's true motivations, as well as the first mention of them referring to the partnership between Ink and X-Gaster, which are obviously really important to the whole plot. It also has the first speaking lines from Core Frisk, and they kind of come off as not having emotions, which is far from the truth, but thankfully later episodes remedy this. I also like the use of the Echo Flowers, very clever, very neat.
Which, of course, would mean that I own you.
I remember getting my mind absolutely blown when Season 2 Prologue Owners first came out, learning all this stuff about the true nature of the timeline that Underverse's version of Original Sans is from that recontextualizes a lot of various lines from throughout Season 1. In retrospect, the revelations aren't actually that big, but still really cool. That plus the first appearance of Undertale Gaster in his conversation with X-Gaster makes for a pretty decent prologue to Season 2.
Special delivery! Pain!
Of course, the tragedy that is the story of XTale had to include at least one genocide timeline, and it's fittingly harrowing. Seeing X-Gaster change the kind-hearted XTale Frisk into a mindless killer while XTale Kara fights back is great foreshadowing for what will happen in Season 2, and is given exactly the amount of weight it deserves. Plus, XTale Muffet is pretty cool, and Alphys finally begins to rebel against X-Gaster. No complaints here, this just can't justifiably go any higher because of the length.
Although it is a boost for my emotionally unavailable bad boy image, you know.
I wasn't around in the fandom yet when 0.2 first came out, but I would imagine that this episode is when people first started to really take Underverse seriously as both a story and a piece of art. Mostly because it has the series' first in-depth fight scene that really started to show Jackie's strengths in not just actual animation, but shot composition as well. Not a whole lot happens in terms of plot though, to be honest, besides characters beginning to learn each other's motives and such. And Crust takes the code of Snowdin from Underfell, I guess. Oh, and I haven't been talking about the soundtrack a whole lot, because we all know Nyx the Shield is good at what he does. But I did just want to quickly mention how much I like Stereohead Studios' style of soundtrack. Nice accidental alliteration there, Phil. Like how the soundtrack really flows with each individual beat of the scene, so you can like picture the scene beat for beat in your head when you listen to the track. Still annoyed that the entire second half of this episode's OST was never uploaded to the internet anywhere. Trust me, I have looked, but what can you do? Not a bad episode by any means, things just get way better from there.
Computer over? Virus equals very yes!
So, kinda unfortunately, the lowest episode from Season 2 on this list is the most recent one. Granted, 0.7 Part 2 just came out, so I haven't really had time to completely sort through my feelings on it, but here's what I've got at the moment. I went into this episode wondering exactly how Geno and Fatal Error were going to fit into this already very complex story, and I came out of this episode still kind of wondering that. Okay, not entirely. Geno and Fatal Error's words to X-Gaster do seem to have an effect on him, but I guess we just don't know exactly how much that will affect things going forward. I guess maybe this could just be coming from me having expectations that didn't really happen. I thought they would be spending a lot more time in the Aftertale timeline, and so the Fatal Error fight would happen there, and Geno and Fatal Error would meet, and maybe Error himself would get involved too, but obviously none of that happened. I guess I shouldn't have expected it to. Maybe that's on me. Hopefully some of it will in the future though. I just hope this isn't the last we've seen of Geno and Fatal Error in this series. Anyway, this episode is still pretty good and has good animation and a cool fight scene and some interesting character developments and all that, but all the other stuff I mentioned is gonna keep it just out of A tier. Alright, let's talk about that A tier.
Oh, a tier!
Yes, very funny. Are you gonna, comment on any of the actual episodes that I'm talking about, or...?
I'm trying! I just can't think of what to say!
Well, I feel you there. So, insert description of whatever an A tier usually is. I don't know.
So much death.
XTale's story comes to a head in the 10th timeline, where the inhabitants of the world get to live one final life before everything goes to crap and X-Gaster finally gets what he wants out of this first phase of his game. But XTale 10 is only half of this story, the version told mostly through X-Gaster's perspective, the other being found in the Timeline 10 comic, which we'll talk about in a bit. Everything this episode brings to the table is great, and a fair bit of it is original stuff not found in the comic. Unfortunately though, the back half of the episode especially feels almost like supplemental material to the comic, like it expects you to have read the comic already without making it at all clear that it expects that of you. Honestly, that really is my only beef with this episode, that it doesn't advertise the comic as required material for fully understanding the story, causing a lot of people to completely miss out on it. But like I said, the episode itself is really good.
You destroyed my favorite thing in the world. You will feel pain.
My favorite episode of XTale is XTale 5. This was the first of the few lengthier episodes of the prequel series, and really came out of nowhere in that regard. Like, based on what we knew of each of the previous timelines from the comic, I don't think anyone was expecting Timeline 5 to end up being so important. Undyne is great as always, and I really love how unexpectedly tragic XTale Alphys' story ended up being. Plus other little details like showing exactly why Kara ended up stronger than Frisk, and even showing the origin of Cross's energy knives. Did I mention that I really like Undyne? Yeah, I mean, she's my second favorite character in Undertale, and her XTale counterpart is just perfect. Great stuff.
This world has been connected.
When 0.5 first came out, I was a little underwhelmed by the lack of a long fight scene. It was the first true episode of Underverse in a long time, so I was hoping for a bit more of a return to form that I didn't really get. But as more episodes have come out since, this episode has grown on me a lot. I've come to see it as the 0.1 of Season 2, the episode that establishes the status quo of the season before the plot really gets underway. But in this case, well, first of all, the animation is so much better, and there is a fight scene that is really cool despite how short it is. In the end, it does exactly what it needs to, setting the somber tone for the Undertale side of Season 2's plot.
In space.
Let me tell you about my first experience with Underverse 0.4. This was the first new episode to come out after I got into the series, and I was so excited, especially for the Ink vs. Error fight that we knew was coming. Who would win? Would they go the predictable route and have the good guy Ink win? Or have Error win and leave it off on a cliffhanger? Man, how did I not see all the red flags with Ink? I was an idiot. And wow, did it deliver. Mostly. So the Ink vs. Error fight is incredible. Yeah, those two possible outcomes I mentioned earlier. How about instead Ink wins, but that's a bad thing? The way the fight is used as the frame for X-Caster's return and the destruction of the multiverse, I could honestly make a whole video about what makes this fight so good. The whole ending, honestly, is just a perfectly terrible way to end Season 1. And the beginning of the episode 2 is really good, with X-Caster's formal introduction into the series, and Sigma Signal is still my favorite Nyx the Shield soundtrack ever. But the middle does kind of drag a little bit. I mean, it's all important stuff, but after the 10th time of watching the episode, it does tend to get a little boring. Still, the pros of Season 1's finale far outweigh the cons.
I like tacos.
In my opinion, the episode where Underverse really came into its own was 0.3 Part 1. A lot of that might have to do with Kara's expertly executed return in the ending, but the whole episode is still great too. The surface of Underswap is a beautiful setting, the confrontation with Cross without Kara's help is short but effective, and the character work is excellent as always. I mentioned Stereohead's soundtracks while talking about 0.2, and everything I said there applies even more so here. This is definitely the better OST of the two episodes they scored. It all helps set the mood so well. And like I said, the ending is amazing and still manages to give me chills every time. Alright, now we've made it to the best of the best, the S tier. You, gonna say anything?
Nope.
Okay then.
What can men do against such reckless hate?
Sorry XTale series, none of your episodes can quite compete with the OG. Guys, if any of you still haven't read the XTale Timeline 10 comic, go do it now, it's amazing. This is the events of Timeline 10 told mostly through Cross's perspective, and like I said earlier, some of the stuff here that's not shown in the episode is still really important to understanding the overall story. And besides that, it's just a really good read. I honestly think that this is still the best introduction to the story of XTale as it was originally meant to be. Very intense, but still with lighthearted moments when appropriate, very well paced, just like any of the best episodes of Underverse. Go read it.
You kinda suck.
Yeah, I'm not doing okay.
The only criticism I have of 0.7 Part 1 is that the OG universe stuff and the stuff out in the multiverse aren't really connected at all. That's it. Everything else is amazing. The stuff in the Undertale universe with Undyne fighting the XTale people and X-Caster giving everyone the memories of Frisk's atrocities in the previous timeline is great and is given all the weight it deserves. And the stuff with Ink, Error, and Fresh is just so fun. Any appearance from Error is always great, and can we talk about the surprise MVP of this episode, Fresh? I was curious for the longest time where the storyline of Ink promising Fresh payment for watching over XTale would go, and having it tie into Ink realizing how much pain X-Caster is in is a great payoff. And that fight scene, I had my reservations about how an actual canon appearance of Fresh Ink would go, but it was done absolutely perfectly here. Ink's character arc continues to be super interesting, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here.
Finally, you need therapy.
Okay, so take everything I said in the previous entry about the one problem being how disconnected the two halves of the episode feel, but how both individual halves are still amazing on their own, and then give it the most impressive animation in the series to date. That's 0.6. I say most impressive and not best because, let's be real, the animation throughout all of Season 2 has been basically perfect. But when you have a fight scene that involves 4 players, one of whom is the amorphous, goopy mess that is Nightmare, and you do it this well, that becomes very hard to top. And just look at some of these shots, like this rotating shot where the characters are moving in a circle in the opposite direction that the camera's going and it looks flawless. Do you have any idea how hard that is to pull off? Oh, and this one, when X-Caster is controlling Cross and we actually see him as X-Caster through his blades for a second. Oh, so cool. On the writing side of things, someone could, I guess, make the argument that Cross gets over his trauma unrealistically quickly, but considering he does so well in a battle against the literal personification of negative feelings, with the literal personification of positive feelings helping him, I think I can give it a pass. Oh, and the stuff happening over in Undertale is good too, but we all know what the real highlight of this episode is. Okay, I may have lied a little about the S tier being the best of the best because I'm actually going to give these last 2 episodes something that I'm not going to give a lot of things going forward.
Is it pie?
But no, how could I give pie to an episode?
Trying really hard?
Well, I don't have any anyway.
Oh, can I have some?
I just said, it's an S+ tier. I'm giving them an S+ tier.
Oh, that's boring.
What, have you seen these episodes? They totally deserve it.
They deserve more. They deserve better. They deserve...
Don't say pie.
I'm dreaming. But which parts were the dream?
Did anyone expect to see a shorter video this high up? Well, I hope you did, because Extra Scene 2 is perfect. It's just perfect. The inclusion of Undernovella as a lighthearted break from the action, the transition back into the intense stuff, the way Error's dream feels like it plays out how actual nightmares often do. No, as Goro. Error preparing to destroy the multiverse, going into XTale and meeting Fresh, then realizing what the purpose of the X event is and declaring their truce over. Yes, I just described the entire episode because it all just works. 0 complaints from me. I love every second of Extra Scene 2. But then, how is this only at number 2? How can you get better than something perfect?
And coming in at number 1, it's...
The answer is, you just also have to be perfect, but for a longer runtime. I'm going to have a hard time putting into words exactly why I love 0.3 Part 2 so much, but I'll try. Sure, the animation shows its age a little when compared to Season 2, but it's more than good enough, and the writing more than makes up for it, so I don't really care. Is saying it has immaculate vibes enough? That feels like a weird phrase. I'll try a little harder. I think a lot of it comes down to the pacing, the emotional pacing. Every single little moment feels like it comes at the exact right time. The hype moments, the sad moments, the fight scenes. It's even able to have just the right amount of humor without feeling like it undermines the tension. Like I said, every single moment comes at exactly the right time. Plus, every single major player in the story so far is here, and every single one of them is able to play a meaningful part, even if it's just for a brief moment of comedy, and get exactly as much attention as it feels like they deserve at this point in the story. And the soundtrack! This is easily my favorite full episode OST from Nyx the Shield, period. I mean, I like some of the individual tracks and other things he's done better, like I mentioned Sigma Signal earlier, but in terms of a whole episode, every single track here works perfectly. And the ending. What a beautifully sad way to end the episode. That final soundtrack reality still gets me every time. This is a pretty bold statement, but Underverse 0.3 Part 2 is one of my favorite single episodes of animation ever. Sure, there might be full arcs or seasons of other things that I like better than Underverse Season 1, but in terms of single episodes, yeah. And I'm saying that having just recently watched Gravity Falls, Amphibia, and The Owl House for the first time, 2 of which I really loved and 1 of which I just kind of liked. I'll let you try to figure out which one's which. I was planning on saying this before I watched those shows, and I can still say it after. It's just perfect. And there you have it. That was every single episode, short and comic of Underverse and XTale, ranked from my least favorite to my favorite. Feel free to respectfully leave your opinions down in the comments below.
Oh cool, you're done now. How did I do?
I mean, you didn't really help at all. You just kinda said random stuff in between me talking about the actual topic of the video.
Yes, but was I funny? Entertaining? Fun to watch? Some other thing that means the same thing?
Well, that's for them to decide, not me.
Oh, cool! So, what did you think? Huh?
I'll let you know what they say after I post the video.
Yay! I can't wait to show up in the next one no matter what they say. Cause I believe in myself, and I believe I'm funny even if they don't.
Do you need me to call Bean Nana in here?
No.
Okay then, I'm going to end the video now.
Okay, bye.
Me too! Yes, you can leave too. Oh, me too! Alright then, that is all I have for this video, so I will see you guys in my next video, or whichever video of mine you choose to watch next. Bye!
Hi guys, I just wanted to reward anyone who made it this far into the video by allowing you a moment to bask in the radiant glory of my beautiful black eyes. Thank you for your time.